Well, this is Todd Grabbe. Todd is a vice president with Dell Computing. I don't know if any of you have Dell computers, but let me tell you a little bit about that company before I go on to introduce him. It was started by a college student at the University of Texas. Can you guess what his name was? Michael Dell. Started with $1,000, and that was in 1984, believe it or not, 40 years ago. And in 1988, the company went public. Most of you are business students, so you understand what going public means. That's a significant shift in 4 years from starting out of a college classroom going public. 10 years later, 1998, they integrated sales and manufacturing and support center over in China. So here's a company that is on a steep hill of growth. 2013, he said, I want to buy the company back. So they bought the company from their investors and turned it into a dynamic company that it is today. It's one of the leaders in AI technology, and it's a comprehensive multi-cloud portfolio of all kinds of computing and devices. And we're fortunate today to have a vice president of Dell Computing with us. Todd Grabbe is from down in Texas, but today he's meeting with us from Singapore, and he has an international team. One of the reasons I asked him to address my class last semester and again today is because of the challenges that he deals with in communicating with an international team. He's got people that work for him in Texas. He's got people that work for him in Singapore. And that's why he would sit in the corner at different times of the day. Right now, it's 8:40 here in Nebraska. It's 9:40 at night over in Singapore. So that tells you it's a 13-hour time shift between the two parts of the world. And that's one of the things I asked him to talk about. When I look at his LinkedIn profile, he's kind of modest, like Nebraska's. Doesn't talk a lot about himself, but he's a cheerleader. He has just over and over and over congratulated somebody for something that's going on in their life. And I think that makes for a good leader. When you have somebody that is leading you, that cheers you on, that encourages you to work even harder and work even better. Has an engineering degree from Texas A&M, but we won't talk about Texas A&M here in Nebraska. But Todd is going to talk with you about Dell Computing and what it's like to work with teams scattered around the world. So Todd, the stage is yours.
Well, thanks for the great introduction. And I'm certainly pleased to have the opportunity to speak again this year. I enjoyed it last year. So as said, I'm Vice President, Product Development at Dell Technologies. I've been at Dell now for about 11 years. I've had quite the journey. I came to Dell from an acquisition. Prior to that, I had started a company with 4 of my colleagues that ended up developing rugged laptops, really targeting military law enforcement applications. And we had enough success that we caught the eye of Dell and eventually was purchased back in 2012, which was, as Randy was saying, was right before Dell decided to go public or private in 2013. So we joined when we were a public company, went through the transition of going private, and then a few years later went back public again. So quite the journey at Dell. I mentioned that I had graduated from Texas A&M. I actually graduated with a civil engineering degree, but went straight into software development after graduating, and kind of ended up moving through various technology companies, typically around computing, whether that was applied computing applications or industrial computing applications. But again, eventually found my way into developing ruggedized systems for the military and law enforcement. So I lead a team at Dell called the Strategic Device Engineering Team. And to summarize kind of what that is we try to get to the next slide. We have the responsibility of really developing all of the common commodity components that make up a notebook or desktop system. So these are things that you find common across any laptop that we make, whether it's a consumer laptop, a gaming laptop, a commercial laptop, or a workstation, as well as the variants in physical desktop. So graphics, displays, LCD panels, for instance, wireless devices for communication, storage for storing your files, power adapters, power supply units in our desktops, batteries in our notebooks, keyboards, the touchpads, the audio system, and camera. So pretty much anything that you as a user interface with in a laptop, our team is responsible for. Now, we don't necessarily do the engineering. We work with our suppliers that are distributed throughout the world. We have multiple suppliers in each one of these categories, but my team works with their engineering teams to architect, to develop, and then launch and sustain every part of the laptop. As Randy mentioned, my team is distributed. It's a global team. We have team members in Austin, Texas, where I reside. We have team members in Taiwan, and we kind of use these acronyms ADC and TDC. So Austin Development Center, Taiwan Development Center, Singapore Development Center. So these are large offices of Dell's where we host, large engineering organizations of which my team resides in. So we have about 40 members in Austin. I have about a little over 100 team members in Taiwan. And then I have a relatively small team here in Singapore of about 20 folks, and a little smaller team in Penang, Malaysia, which is just a bit north of here, about 10 team members. So distributed throughout. Luckily, Taiwan and Singapore and Malaysia are in one time zone. So I only have to deal with really two time zones, Austin and Asia. But it still creates some challenges, as was mentioned. So I get on calls early in the morning when it's their evening, and then also have calls late into my evenings when it's their morning. So being on a call at 9:30 at night is not unheard of. It's pretty common. So talking about just organizational communication and some of the challenges in leading a global team. Obviously, the time zone difference. Right now, we're about 13 hours separated. But as we transition into daylight savings, that actually becomes 14 hours. So in early November through early March, that differentiation becomes 14 hours. And you'd be surprised how that 1 hour difference actually changes things. It makes it a bit difficult. Second is language. And so certainly in Texas and in the United States, predominantly English language. But in Asia, it's quite different. It's Mandarin or Chinese, which is the common language. Luckily at Dell, most of the folks we hire have some level of English. But as we start to interface with our suppliers and other teams beyond just our general team, that language barrier can become even more difficult. So looking forward, I think when we talk a little bit about AI, there's some amazing tools now for translation. One that can do that from a written perspective, but even now some capabilities that can do it in real time as you speak, being able to translate from one language to the next. And then the other challenge is really culture. And so we're dealing with multiple cultures between Taiwan, the US, and Singapore. Those cultures are in how they go about their work life, their family life, how they build relationships, what inspires them from a team member perspective, what are their concerns. So as we deal with a global organization, sometimes how you have to deal with folks in the US can be different than managing team members over in Taiwan or Singapore or Malaysia. Our communication methods are pretty common and standard across the industry. Email, of course, is still predominant. Lots of communication amongst team members and other parts of the organization via email. We've at Dell standardized around Teams, but Teams and Zoom are certainly two applications that you can use for virtual meetings and for chatting as well. We're getting back to in-person meetings. So having, traditional in the same room around a whiteboard, discussing a topic. And then we utilize a lot of personal messaging. So in the US, predominantly like iMessage, or SMS with your iPhone or Android, or using an app like WhatsApp. Typically that's preferred here in Singapore and Malaysia, and then an application called Line, which maybe I'll have not even heard of, very common in Taiwan. And so setting up contact lists and all these applications allows me to reach out and talk to my leaders and my team members when I really need to get in touch with them quickly. Another thing, at this level and with a large organization is utilizing a business management system. And this is really, identifying all the touch points that you have with stakeholders and peers, customers that can be internal or external, and your teams to effectively run the business. And so how often do you need to meet? Who do you need to meet with? Who's responsible for developing the content? Who needs to be present? What's the purpose? Is it an informed meeting? Is it a debate meeting? Is it a decide meeting? And then what are those outcomes? And then we typically look at that, throughout the course of the year. So some of our meetings are weekly, some of them bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, twice a year, or even annually. All those are set up so that we make sure that we're touching point with the necessary parts of the business to ensure that we're executing effectively. And then over on the left here, I talked about time management. So these are kind of the four major buckets, especially in a leadership position, that you have to balance. So strategic, this is how you're changing the business. What are you doing to really transform, transition, keep up with the changing dynamics of the economy, world politics, and so forth. Tactical is really your run the business. What do you have to do day to day, week to week to continue to execute and deliver products? Development is time spent with your team, helping them to develop their talent, careers, making sure that they have the skill sets that you need on the team to, again, execute from a tactical perspective and a strategic perspective. And then flex is really the remaining time for you as an individual to work on yourself and to develop. And as you grow in the business, for instance, at a vice president level, that strategic time is really about 20 to 30% of your time. The bulk is still tactical, development a little bit smaller than that, and then flex, usually that's the last 10% of your time. And as you move up even further in the organization, that strategic time gets larger. So you move more from a run the business into a change the business and transform the business. Any questions so far? I think I'm about to transition to a different topic. So anything that you want to ask about or go more in depth on? Okay, I'll move on. So Randy had asked me about kind of our hybrid work policy and some of the challenges that we've seen post COVID. And Dell has been pretty public. Michael himself, Michael Dell, was making some pretty broad statements about remote work was the future. There was really not a need to get back in the office, that we could do everything virtually, that the technology allowed that. But then we had a change in stance a little more than a year ago, where we really asked team members to start coming back into the office, and not full time, but in general, the request or requirement has been about 3 days a week. And really the goal there is to reestablish this kind of organizational efficiency that we had slowly lost when everyone went remote. No doubt when you're working from home and you don't have to commute, you don't have to get ready, you get a lot more personal efficiency because your time is either spent working or balancing your personal life, and all these efforts of commuting and communication kind of get diminished. But you slowly start to lose this organizational efficiency. So for instance, having a virtual meeting isn't as efficient as having a meeting in person. I'm looking at all of you through this, small video image, but I really can't read your body language. I can't see your heads nodding. I can't see if you're connecting with my message, like you can when you're in-person meeting, sitting across the room, and really able to kind of understand, are you getting this? Do we need to go a little bit more in depth? Are you getting bored, for instance, and so forth? So this kind of graph is something I've used with my team. So as you start to come back in the office, you really start to quickly regain this organizational efficiency. The collaboration, the in-person meetings really starts to improve this kind of team effort and alignment and direction. But as you really approach, beyond 3 days, that kind of flattens out, and you're not really gaining anything by being in the office any additional days. But every day you're in the office, you're losing a bit of this personal efficiency. So the intent is really find the right balance where you gain back the relationships, the collaboration, kind of this inspiration that we get from working with each other. But minimize the loss of personal efficiency of getting back in the office. So for my team, that's really about 2 to 3 days a week. We're probably averaging somewhere between that. But I think everyone's felt a lot more connected once we kind of came back into the office environment.
Todd, I did have one question from David.
Sure.
Go ahead, David.
Going back to the different cultures, what's something that, I don't know if he listens to me, but something that he has learned from his Asian workers that he has implemented in his life?
Can you hear the question?
Yeah, so something kind of unique that I learned about the Asian culture that I've had to adopt or address. So one of the things, and this will be specific to Taiwan, but it's really probably broader across Asia as well. They are very keen on personal relationships. And so you really have to invest in kind of going even to the subject here about being back in the office. You have to spend time at a personal level with them. You have to I have to go out to a lot of dinners with suppliers to kind of build those relationships. And once you have that, then you can just pick up the phone and call them when something is urgently happening. But prior to that, you really don't have that connection and that response that you need. So I spent a lot of time once we got out of COVID, traveling, meeting my suppliers face to face, meeting my team members face to face. And what I find is the ones that I have spent that time with, one, they're very more open and transparent about what's going on. I can reach out to them to get their advice. They come to me when there's issues, where the team members that I haven't been able to build those relationships with, they're still very more concerned about hierarchy and sharing things with me directly. So they're very, very relationship oriented. They want to kind of share their personal life, their families, what's going on in their personal life with you, and that really helps build those trusted relationships. I think in the U.S. there's still this tendency, don't share or don't develop those personal relationships, that even asking as a leader is probably considered an HR violation. And so you tend to be more less direct when it comes to what's going on in someone's personal life.
Great question, David. David, by the way, is from Mexico and is one of the great students in the class. So
yeah, I just had one more slide, which is really kind of what is Dell doing with AI. And we look at it kind of in these 4 aspects of in, on, for, and with. So the in is kind of what we want to build into our products. So we want to create more intelligence that just works. It's intuitive. It doesn't even require you to think about AI. The for aspect is, we want to use AI to help us run more efficiently, to help us develop products faster, to help us develop higher quality products. The on, is we really want to create products that can support AI for you to use as an end user. So creating the capability like with Microsoft Copilot, or great performance to run, ChatGPT and other AI models. And then lastly is with, and we've got a lot of press in our partnership with NVIDIA. And so we're working with the ecosystem, to develop great products that actually build or can create AI platforms for our customers to go create services that benefit the rest of society. So we have a pretty comprehensive, we want to utilize it as much as we can. We want to build it into our products. We want to provide it as a service to our end customers, and then we want to partner with the broader ecosystems to really accelerate the capabilities of AI. So I think that's it for my what I wanted to share, but I'll certainly take any questions or hand it over to the next guest speaker.
We have a question here. Go ahead.
Knowing that Apple's like so like dominant in technology with schools and stuff, how are you guys trying to compete with them, like to get in more like schools, like with both, like having more people have Dell computers over Apple?
It's a good question. I mean, certainly, we view Apple as a threat. I think, certainly when you're in use, but in the education system, those are the future workers, right? So they get familiar with the technology. They're more likely to buy an Apple product when they get out into the workforce, or more familiar with working with those products. So even if it's not a area that we want to go compete directly in right now, we know it's key to making sure that our products have relevance in the future. So we do some educational products. Most of them, I think, are in the K through 12 application and large ISDs. I think where we're probably missing is probably in your age group, as you transition and buy your own devices to support your further education when you get into the college. I think there's still probably the preference to move to Apple devices. They have a great ecosystem with their phones and their watches and their AirPods. It's definitely difficult to compete. For Dell, I mean, our largest customer base is commercial. About 75% of our client businesses are in the commercial space, large enterprises. We do have some consumer devices, but it's really not a large part of our business today. Most of it is in the commercial space.
One more.
Oh, one more question
Yeah,
from
sorry.
David.
Like, last question. Like, was it hard to transition from an engineering background to like a leadership role?
Hey, ask that question again, David.
Yeah. Like how hard it was to transition from an engineering background to like a leadership role?
Hey, a great question. I think, certainly at Dell, when we look at career paths, there's certainly a long career path to staying technical. We have what's called a technical leadership role, which allows you to stay in the technical field. You may have an opportunity to manage a small team. Think of it like a professor that's running a lab at a university, focused on a very specific, project or topic. Or like me, you can take a leadership path. And so you can still come up through the engineering ranks. But as it really comes down to your passion. Do you want to move into leadership, or do you want to stay technical? Dell has some great, what we call leadership accelerator programs. I got to be part of that, and that's how I transitioned from a director. And directors at Dell, I was managing, 20 to 30 people, typically local. But I went through a leadership program that really taught me how to move up to that vice president level. And after completing that, which was a 2-year coursework, so much like being in a university, it just happened to be a university of Dell. But they helped train me for what was really expected at the next level, and got the opportunity to drive this. So I think it's going to come down to, as you start to work through your career, really understanding yourself, and do you have a passion for leadership, or do you have a passion to stay more in the technical side?
Well, Todd, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and now you can go to bed and sleep well.